Thanks for coming out today. I'm gonna piggyback off of what we just talked about on the previous session, talking about how we go from vibe coding more over into AI engineering. But first, a little background on me. My name is Darren Mills. I'm the CTO at Clean Slate. We are a AWS Premier partner located on the north side up in Carmel. Been doing consulting for 30 plus years. Love the whole application development lifecycle, but things are changing, right? So this AI, as our keynote mentioned, it's coming. I'm a tech pessimist, but we have to be prepared for it. And our company has been, right there in the muck trying to figure out what's going on. But since we're a consulting company, we kind of have to deal with this productivity paradox, right? Vibe coding's real. I've took a lot of crappy ideas and I've shipped them to production very, very quickly. The problem is that it doesn't scale. So as a consulting company, we've got to deliver software to our clients that is maintainable, that's secure, and that can last for 10 plus years. There's a big investment in that software platform they're usually hiring us for. And vibe coding is not the solution, right? But if our code can go faster, why can't our projects go faster? So I did some research, and I was actually out at Amazon a couple weeks ago to talk to them about this as well. And what we're seeing is, yes, coding is going faster, but production releases are not. Why? Because, well, we've switched the long tent in the pole. Development's no longer the longest and most time-consuming process. It can go faster, but the other human elements in that software development lifecycle are at play, right? So we have some lessons learned, right? Our requirements have to take a lot longer because when you get to non-deterministic AI, requirements have to be able to determine, do I turn right or turn left? And if it's anything ambiguous, you're going to get inconsistent results. So, the thing here is what we're trying to do is talk about how do we move from vibe coding and get something more into AI engineering where we can get deterministic code out of a non-deterministic platform. So kind of talk about where we started. It's probably about 18 months ago. I did a survey across our company and said, okay, guys, our biggest and brightest application engineers, what are you guys using for AI? Are you guys using AI? You're not using AI? And I got mixed results. Some engineers were anti-AI. I was kind of in that spectrum as well. I had tried to do some stuff with AI from a development standpoint, and I got laughable results out of it. But what I found is that we had 10 people responding. We had 10 people doing 10 different things, which is a CTO of a company. That terrified me. That's not what I want. Because we're trying to write consistent code that can be maintained by our clients. So we had to come up with a solution, and we talked, about what we're going to do, what the right platform was. Was it GPT? Was it Claude? Was it Copilot? And then came along a product called Kiro on the AWS space and says, okay, now this is getting to be a solved problem. So let's talk about, since we're an AWS Premier partner, let's talk about standardizing on kind of practice what we preach. And what we learned was that, the methodology is changing. Right? We're not just in this traditional SDLC model anymore. There's actually something called AI DLC, something I didn't even know about until 4 weeks ago when I was out in Seattle. The good news is that we'd kind of been living that life already. We started with our lessons learned, and we were, getting that point to where we're doing a lot of the things that AI DLC is preaching about. But things are different, and we have to embrace it. And so I think what we hear in the industry is that we're doing a lot of AI-assisted coding, but we're not talking about AI-assisted project delivery, which is kind of where my talk is heading to. It's one of the things that just kind of a quick thing from an Epic standpoint. When we're doing our software development, we were typically writing stories and doing development at the story level. But we've been very, very good at some of the guardrails and steering files that we'd now be able to generate much bigger chunks of code and moving things more towards the Epic layer. So I don't know, we haven't made the transition completely yet, but we might get to the point where we're not using stories anymore and we're moving and writing code around epics, which is going to completely change the velocity of where we're going. But that velocity of the coding doesn't mean that the velocity of the project is going faster, right? So how do we start to include the other aspects of the delivery lifecycle into the AI ecosystem? So what we've come up with is, look, we can AI DLC has AI injected into every phase, from project management to requirements to UI UX to architecture design to development to QA and testing and to DevOps. Right? We've been able to figure out how to get AI injected into every phase of the project lifecycle, so that way we can start to combat the issues we have where coding goes faster, but the project doesn't go faster. Have we got it figured out yet? No. Would love to hear from you guys on some of the things, because this is a evolving weekly kind of technology problem. Even when I was out at AWS, they had, they're 2 years into their AI DLC journey, and they're still learning, right? But a lot of the metrics that we're seeing, they're also seeing. So how do we approach it, right? And this is one of the things that we kind of talk about our AI maturity level. And the things that we're focusing on is, what the clients want to hear, what everyone wants to hear across the industry is speed, right? You can go really, really fast, but you can create technical debt and a bunch of crap code really, really fast as well with AI. So we got to take a step back. Let's talk about consistency, right? Consistency is the first thing that I want to be able to see as we start talking about our AI model. Even if I get consistent crap, Mythbusters proved I can polish a turd. And so if I can get consistency back, I can now start to worry about improving the quality of it. So once I get consistency and I start to work through quality, once I get that stuff figured out, security, is it cost optimized? Is it performant? Is it scalable? Those things, now I can start worrying about speed. When I worry about speed is how I can start to roll it out to a team to be able to produce high quality code at a very quick pace, because that's where vibe coding starts to break down at. Vibe coding, I can ship stuff out to production very quickly, but I can't scale it across an organization. I can't scale it across a team of 10, 15 engineers, because I'm going to get inconsistent results back across the board. And I've just increased my technical debt as soon as I've done that. So I want to be able to get consistent. I want to be able to get quality. I want to be able to get to speed. So here comes Kiro, right? What makes Kiro special? Well, Kiro gives us an IDE in order for us to be able to do that. It's more than just a web interface like ChatGPT. It gives us an IDE where we can start to embed special attributes or special files like steering files, agents, guardrails, hooks, all these kind of things into an IDE to be able to help us get this deterministic result out of a non-deterministic engine. So it has an IDE, it's got a CLI. We do spec-driven development. It's got hooks and steering files. We can create skills and powers. We can do custom agents. And the good news for us, since it's tightly integrated with AWS, it is the smartest engineer in the room when it comes to knowing how to coach it. So as we start to dive down into more, what do these things mean, right? An agent is who's doing the work. A steering file, or what rules does the AI follow? A skill is kind of that expertise. It's that niche space that it's really good at. The hooks are what I consider to be the linting. It's how is all this stuff enforced. And the spec is really, what are my requirements? What am I trying to produce? So if we start to look at this across the board, steering files in essence is like, I'm going to use some examples here, and hopefully I didn't think this through very well, so hopefully it goes well. So steering files are like, let's say I have a company, so we're a consulting company. I work across many different clients and many different projects. So as a company, I might want to put some standards around, hey, this is how we do Java development. This is how we do C# development. This is how we do Python development. And use that across the board from an organizational standpoint. But then when I get to a client might say, you know what, we only do Java development and we only do C# development. So my steering files can start to narrow as we start about organizational steering files, then client steering files, and then project steering files. Because as the client may have, say, this is a Java or a C# or a Python company, then you might get to a specific project that says, we only want to do Java development on this project. So my steering files are going to govern, how do I write Java? What are the standards? What are the architectural principles? What are all those things that make my app conform so I get coding done the way I want to do it? No differently than I would do if I had a bunch of junior engineers on the team and say, I want you to code this way. This is what our pull requests are going to look like. The skills are that niche of intelligent wrapping around how do I do something. So I might have an authentication engine. We're going to use Cognito for our authentication. I can write a skill that's specialized about how to use Cognito with a web application, a REST service, SOAP service, whatever. It's going to have that skill to be able to know how to do that. The specs are exactly what they are. It's the requirements. So it's formatted just a little bit differently than what a normal BRD would be, or user stories and stuff like that. A spec is driven, to a certain standard, so that way the AI engine understands what we're writing. And so the shift's going to be really unusual to see what we have in the next 12 months, because we might be getting away from who cares about source code. And if there's a bug in the source code, we might be saying, hey, let's go fix the technical specification that generated the source code versus go fix the source code. The hooks are the linting. So how do I make sure that my steering files and everything else was done correctly? How do I know I didn't hallucinate along the way from an AI standpoint? Well, the hooks are those linters that go back and validate, did everything get followed, and what are the special checks? What are the validators I want to put in place in order to make sure things are going to be consistent and have a high quality, so that way I can get to that speed part. And then the agents those are the guys that are running it. So I've had situations where I do application assessments, and I've had 5 or 6 agents running for almost 8 hours a day, because I've got a really good handle on my steering files and everything else that I can produce consistent results, and it just scales. So how do we take, and then I guess the last thing is, once we have all those things pieced together, we can create a power. And a power is like a package manager. It is being able to say, I have all these different components I want to put together. And I want to put it into a releasable artifact. So that way I can have that Kiro power ingested by other Kiro users. So that way I don't have to worry about deploying files or trying to do repo management or trying to do file system management. That power now becomes a read-only skill inside of that user's workspace that now we can iterate on, we can version, we can have a backlog. Much different than having, just something in a repo where we might have to have, where kind of what we're dealing right now at our company is we have some skill drift and some steering file drift. We can eliminate that by moving those things over into a power. So what's our special sauce? Well, like I said, we're a consulting company, so we've got to take aspects of many different aspects of, our organizational standards, our client standards, our project standards, which is no different than what an enterprise company would be tackling. And that's why we're trying to move from that vibe coding world over into AI engineering. So how do we do this? Well, we have Kiro is our IDE. We have MCP servers that have, host our requirements, host our design, our design principles, and so forth. We have right now we have a steering file repo. So that has all of our company steering files, all the client and project steering files in it. We take all that together and we have a working directory. So as you're working in a particular directory, it's aware of what client and what project you're on. So it knows what standards to apply. And then basically, all that is what our guardrails on in order to how do we get consistent, repeatable results out of an AI engine. So what have we seen from the results of this? I got some project metrics here to kind of show, what have we actually seen in practice. We have this running across 5 different projects right now in our company. This is a big project here that we're introduced it to. You can kind of see where we're at. And like Sprint 6 was really when we started to embrace some of the AI engineering, roll it out to the rest of the team. And if you can see, our velocity did get faster. Right? But has our releases gotten faster? No, because now we've created an unsurmountable QA backlog that we've actually got to rethink and retool how our team is doing QA. The interesting thing that I thought is that when we originally rolled this out, we didn't have that lessons learned to say we need to really invest in our requirements process. And so you can kind of see here, our defect rate went up, right? So we didn't have the requirements tuned to that level of detail where the AI engine knew how to be, when I got to something that was ambiguous, sometimes it turned right, sometimes it turned left. Well, I always wanted to turn right. So we had to go back and invest in our requirements process in order to be able to get that deterministic result out of it. And then if you look at the results, well, we've done really, really well. We're not only moving faster, we're moving faster with a lower defect rate, which is kind of amazing. And I hate to admit it because I'm a tech pessimist, but it is working. But what we got to figure out now is how do we get project velocity increased, which is all those other human in the loop things that we might be able to try to automate with AI, which that is the whole AI DLC principle. How do we pull in AI into every phase of the project outside of just AI assisted delivery? So what we're creating is one platform from every role inside of our company. We're using it across the board, not just from our engineering and architects and our project managers, but we're also using it in sales. It's really, really good at helping me write statements of work and making sure my assumptions are correct and protecting me, taking an RFP and analyzing it to understand what can I do. And from a delivery standpoint, how do I plan out my work? How do I manage my resources? How do I manage my projects across the board? So we are looking at it this is not just a AI assisted coding platform. Our whole company is changing. One of the things that we're doing is, branded deliverables from a prompt, right? This whole presentation I built was from Kiro. I didn't touch anything in this. If I wanted something different in the slide, I wanted to use a little bit of wording, I tell Kiro to go regenerate this PowerPoint. Really, really cool stuff. And we've been able to take this and move it past just AI assisted delivery. And, we have a project now that we've rolled it out with. We're doing a merger and acquisition. It's actually a divestiture. So we're taking a very large organization with hundreds of AWS accounts. And we're trying to say, hey, these 10, 15, 20 AWS accounts are going to get divested into a new company. How do we do that planning? How do we make sure we don't miss anything from a requirement standpoint? How do we make sure we don't have any security issues? How do we understand all the networking and diagramming? Well, we used Kiro to be able to help generate 22 different architectural diagrams that represented what our plan was. All those look just like they were hand drawn. We have the skills embedded, so they use AWS icons. It doesn't look anything different from a human wrote it versus it was something from Lucidchart or some Visio. Putting together status reports and executive documentation. The executive team's going, oh my gosh, I don't understand what any of this means. Can you summarize it? Well, normally it would take someone high level to be able to go and summarize it. Well, we can take AI and have it produce us a good summary. Now, we still have that human in the loop, right? As they mentioned before, kind of don't stop writing, let AI edit. I do believe that pretty extensively because it can hallucinate. And nothing worse than getting up in front of a stage just like this and looking at a slide and going, oh shit, I don't know what that means. And they're like, didn't you write it? I'm like, dog ate my homework maybe. So hopefully I haven't got to that moment yet, and don't ask me stupid questions I may not be able to answer. The other thing we'd be able to do is, AI assessment, right? So this is outside of that code writing. Worked with an organization, they have over 100 apps at their disposal, and they have a new executive team. They don't understand what they have. So how do we go in and do analysis of 100 different applications in a short time frame to be able to get them some repeatable? Another consulting company was in there. They spent 6 months, and they didn't learn anything new. We created some skills and some steering files about how do we go in and assess the applications, and we're producing, oodles and oodles of documentation that people are reading. These are not just paperweights. But the CTO of the company was like, oh my gosh, in 2 weeks, you guys produced more than what another company did in 6 months. And again, that is the power of AI. It is absolutely phenomenal and it is awesome. But you have to make sure you have the right guardrails and skills in place so it doesn't go cattywampus on you and generate a bunch of things that you don't understand. So what are some of our lessons learned? Adoption matters, right? We have to get our team on board to be able to do consistent work. I can't have half my development team using Cursor. I can't have the other half using Claude. It's not going to work. And we've had that resistance, right? And as the CTO, I've embraced that resistance because what I assume is going to happen is the engineers that are going to embrace AI are going to move at a different velocity with a different level of quality than the people who aren't going to embrace AI. And if you want to become a dinosaur, become a dinosaur. That's going to be reflected in your comp plans and your reviews and all the other kind of things that middle managers are going to do. But sure enough, what we've been able to see is some of the initial resistors, who one may be in this room, I think. Where is he at? I don't know. Daniel. Oh, there Daniel is. Daniel's now, he's on board, right? So sorry to call you out, Daniel. It is what it is. But the part of it is that, like as we talked about, get consistency, then get quality, then get speed. Is you got to build up that framework first, and I don't know if that's the right mindset, but you got to have a mindset because it can just go wild with technical debt, and that's one thing that we're trying to avoid. It writes a ton of code, and a lot of that code may or may not be necessary. So that's why we have these other guardrails in place to help prevent that. The one thing that I've learned is that the limit is me. It's how I think. I don't know how many times I was like, oh man, I don't know how to do this. And I get stuck and I'll go talk to, a guy on my team. How would you do this? And he's like, idiot, go ask Kiro. And so one of the stupid vibe coding apps I created was let me Kiro that for you. It's back in the let me Google that for you that I used to send out to people being a little snarky smartass. But now I do it with Kiro, and I was out in Seattle and I asked a really dumb question to a really, really smart guy. And he goes, I just asked Kiro for that. And I'm like, oh dude, that's like my whole premise of what I just created a whole website about. I felt really stupid. But the last thing I would say from the lessons learned is you got to kind of meet the engineers where they are. I didn't want to force it down. I wanted our team to innovate, and we're still innovating. And this stuff's changing every day. And I'm just letting my team go rampant. I know there's this token maxing and all this other kind of stuff. I've told our leadership team, I don't care what the stuff costs. Like, we have to figure it out, and that is just the cost of what it's going to take to learn. Whether it's from how many tokens you're burning. I know we actually maxed out. We had one developer, he maxed out Kiro tokens. He hit over 20,000 tokens in a month, and he got locked out. Absolutely awesome. I talked to the Kiro product lead, and he's like, holy shit, why did we let that happen? You guys wanted to spend money? We should absolutely let you spend money. That's been fixed, right? They're coming out with a whole new credit sharing plan and some other things from a Kiro standpoint, which is really, really interesting. So, you got to limp in. I'm not going to say, hey, the boat's left the dock already, but I think you have to limp in. You're going to have to understand where it is, and I think most people already are. But you've got to worry about that maturity and that adoption level. So if you wanted to get started, Kiro's awesome. It's out there. It's got its own website. Get it downloaded, get it installed. Start small, think big when it comes to do things. If you don't know how to do something, ask Kiro. The one thing I didn't include in here is source code files and snippets and demos. Like, who gives a crap anymore? Ask Kiro. Kiro, I don't know how to write a steering file. It will tell you, hey, Kiro, I don't know what I'm doing. ask me questions to help me figure out what I'm doing. That's the new mindset. And that's the new mentality, and it's beyond what prompt engineering was maybe a year ago. And the last one is just to continue to expand. Think outside the box. Think more than just AI assisted delivery, or think more than just AI assisted coding. Think AI assisted delivery. How do I use this across my entire project ecosystem? So finally, we're going to host an office hours tomorrow. So if you guys have questions, this is a space that I'm continuing to learn in. Every time I give this talk, I'm hearing feedback that, hey, you guys are doing it wrong, or maybe you're not doing it wrong. I would love to hear from you guys. We're going to host an office hours tomorrow to talk about this and also talk about some of our other presentations. It's just going to be an engineer geek talk. Come hang out if you want to. There's questions I have. I want to learn from you guys as well as you guys learn from us. But welcome for you guys to join. I think it's tomorrow at 3 to 5 or 3:30 to 5.